Chapter 1 Yorkshire, England, September 1760. After the carriage wreck, and a bit before the horses ran away, Lady Georgina Maitland noticed that her land steward was a man. Well, that is to say, naturally she knew Harry Pye was a man. She wasn't under the delusion that he was a lion, or an elephant, or a whale, or indeed any other member of the animal kingdom, if one could call a whale an animal and not just a very big fish. What she meant was that his maleness had suddenly become very evident. George knit her brow as she stood in the desolate highroad leading to East Riding in Yorkshire. Around them, the gorse-covered hills rolled away into the grey horizon. Dark was rapidly falling, brought on early by the rainstorm. They could have been standing at the ends of the earth. "Do you consider a whale to be an animal or a very big fish, Mr. Pye?" she shouted into the wind. Harry Pye's shoulders bunched. They were covered only by a wet lawn shirt that clung to him in an aesthetically pleasing way. He'd previously discarded his coat and waistcoat to help John Coachman unhitch the horses from the overturned carriage. "An animal, my lady." Mr. Pye's voice was, as always, even and deep, with a sort of gravelly tone toward the bottom. George had never heard him raise his voice or show passion in any way. Not when she'd insisted on accompanying him to her Yorkshire estate. Not when the rain had started, slowing their travel to a crawl. Not when the carriage had overturned 20 minutes ago. How very irritating. "Do you think you will be able to right the carriage?" She pulled her soaked cloak up over her chin as she contemplated the remains of her vehicle. The door hung from one hinge, banging in the wind. 2 wheels were smashed, and the back axle had settled at an odd angle. It was a thoroughly idiotic question. Mr. Pye didn't indicate by action or word that he was aware of the silliness of her query. "No, my lady." George sighed. Really, it was something of a miracle that they and the coachman hadn't been hurt or killed. The rain had made the road slippery with mud, and as they had rounded the last curve, the carriage had started to slide. From inside, she and Mr. Pye had heard the coachman shouting as he tried to steady the vehicle. Harry Pye had leapt from his seat to hers, rather like a large cat. He'd braced himself against her before she could even utter a word. His warmth had surrounded her, and her nose, buried intimately in his shirt, had inhaled the scent of clean linen and male skin. By that time, the carriage had tilted, and it was obvious they were falling into the ditch. Slowly, awfully, the contraption had tipped over with a grinding crash. The horses had whinnied from the front, and the carriage had moaned as if protesting its fate. She'd clutched Mr. Pye's coat as her world upended, and Mr. Pye grunted in pain. Then they were still again. The vehicle had rested on its side, and Mr. Pye rested on her like a great warm blanket. Except Harry Pye was much firmer than any blanket she'd ever felt before. He'd apologized most correctly, disentangled himself from her, and climbed up the seat to wrest open the door above them. He'd crawled through, and then bodily pulled her out. George rubbed the wrist he'd gripped. He was disconcertingly strong. One would never know it to look at him. At one point, almost her entire weight had hung from his arm, and she wasn't a petite woman. The coachman gave a shout, which was snatched away by the wind, but it was enough to bring her back to the present. The mare he'd been unhitching was free. "Ride her to the next town, Mr. Coachman, if you will," Harry Pye directed. "See if there is another carriage to send back. I'll remain here with her ladyship." The coachman mounted the horse and waved before disappearing into the downpour. "How far is the next town?" George asked. 10 or 15 miles.